Hello, everyone, and welcome to the November 25th Trips and Traps. Andy Serling, Richard Migliore.
I actually got excited, Andy, when you sent me the races we were going to look at, because I think we have a lot to talk about, particularly in the first one.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff going on in the first one down the backstretch that we'll get into in depth. We'll show you the head-on of the backstretch after we show you the pan of the race. And we're going to start out with the sixth race on November 18th. And the horse we're talking about will be the eventual second-place finisher, the number 5 Sources and Methods, the favorite, a horse who I did not like at all going in, and I was completely wrong. He may have lost, but this was a horse, Sources and Methods, Richie, that should have been unsaddled.
Yeah, he was very unlucky, and he didn't break particularly sharp, so maybe that kind of started to set up his trip immediately. But now he's trying to get position going forward, and he's a bit hampered as the 3-horse drifts out across the chute, and we're going to watch that when we watch the head-on. We'll talk more about it. And you could see here where Javier Castellano, his rider, is trying to go forward and get position, but he's basically bottled up and has to be a little bit unsure of himself as where he can go forward.
Well, right. It's interesting. It's interesting watching the head-on because you can't really get the same depth perception that pans, and you see him drifting back to last at this point. Now, the 2 and 3 are in front of him, and now at this point he's closer to inside of those horses, and you're going to see not only is here's Javier back here, but you're going to see the 3 come over on the 2, and that forces him to steady, but it really hurts Javi's mount.
Well, it really does, because watch Javier. He's got to steady and basically angle out abruptly, because at that point, as a rider, you don't know if there's going to be an accident in front of you. And when horses get to bouncing, especially off the fence and making that kind of body contact, the next thing that you know, they're going down and you're caught up in behind them. So now he has to angle out abruptly, and he goes from the rail to about the 5 path. But really, what were his options at that point?
No, I mean, there's self-preservation. There's just safety in general. You're riding a horse. You certainly don't want to get into an incident. And at that point, when he had to check like that, I mean, it's amazing how quickly you have to think in those situations, because a lot of those situations, somebody goes down, Richie.
Yeah, and you could see how he had to react. Now, even though he was still maybe 2 lengths behind them, so he wasn't up on their heels, you don't know if the next thing is the horse is tumbling and you're stuck in behind him. He angled out. I thought this horse ran extremely well to be able to rally as quickly as he did after checking abruptly and being wide.
And I also think it shows the athleticism of Javier Castellano that he was able to do that. And he didn't lose an enormous amount of rhythm on this horse. Now we're going to show him. You know it's the 5. You'll see what happens, because there's a couple of points right away where the 3 horse is going to come out, as you had noted, and the 3 and going to hamper his progress. And you'll notice the rider of the 3, Katie Davis, she isn't even looking.
Yeah, now, we don't want to pile on Katie Davis here, but she's very inexperienced. This is a 10-pound bug, and she's easy to spot. The horse with the white face, and she's going to come out from behind the leader here, and she's going to drift, and actually drift considerably if you watch where the rail is and where she winds up. So that's the first bit of trouble that Javier Castellano encounters. He has to steady, angle in over her heels. Now he really can't go forward, because how do you handicap, Andy? How far is she going to come back over? And again, this speaks to her inexperience. She may develop into a good rider, but at this point, it doesn't seem to me like she understands where she's at and her responsibility, not just to herself, but the riders around her.
And the horses around her as well. And it's a tough situation. And here's what we're talking about. Javier is in the back. There's the 3. There's the 2 on the inside. Javier's trying to get between them, but he's trying to maintain some distance. And you're going to see as they come to the turn, and boy, the turns are going to get sharper as we get into the winter. The 3 horse is going to come over on the 2, and that causes all the problems for Javier's mount, Sources and Methods.
And here's the thing. Katie Davis is going up inside the 4 horse where it's tight already. Now, you know they're going to accordion or fold over as they hit the turn. She has a responsibility, the rider on the inside of her. Now, watch how he gets knocked into the fence. And I know some people say, well, it's the 4 horse's fault. No, it's not. The horse in between, if a rider goes to that place, they have to be certain that they not only can get there, that they can hold their position. Obviously, she didn't have enough horse to get in there and keep that horse off the horse on the inside of her. It was her responsibility. And basically, Abel Castellano was in a world of trouble, and he was very fortunate.
Yeah, he was unlucky to get in that spot, but fortunate that he was able not to get taken, put down. And that's a tough thing. When you're threading the needle, it's one thing to thread the needle on a straightaway, but to do it at the break of the turn, Richie.
No, well, you have to know when it's time to give way. You can't continually go forward when you're getting that point where horses are going to change leads and come over. And I just don't think she has a good understanding of that. And that's something that she's going to have to get very mindful of very quickly, because something bad will happen.
Especially when we go to the inner, and there's 2-turn races, and the turns are sharper. So in this situation, hopefully a learning experience, and also sources and methods. It's not going to be a price last time, but you can rest assured he should have won last time. And if he runs in any kind of similar race, he's going to beat these horses. We'll take a look at the 8th race, same day, November 18th, and we'll start out with the head-on. This is a horse. John Velasquez riding Muana Rose just got very unlucky. I think both Richie and I believe that if Muana Rose hadn't stumbled like that, probably would have won this race, believe it or not.
Well, he stumbled severely, and not just once, twice. I mean, the horse did an amazing job of catching himself. Johnny did an amazing job of staying in the middle of this horse.
Let's watch the pan of this race. We've seen enough head-on.
Yeah, I mean, and you can see what happens after they go a little bit. What happens a lot of times, Andy, when a horse stumbles like that, they kind of startle themselves. And the rider's reaction is like, yeah, get up, and you're almost kind of like picking them up and smacking them on the shoulder at the same time because you want them to get on their feet. And now the horse is in a bit of a panic mode, and this horse gets to running off a bit, I think, with Johnny after that stumble.
Yeah, and he actually gets himself into the race. Now, maybe you could argue, and he steadies a little bit right there, a little tight inside it too. You could argue that Johnny did a good job of at least not losing complete contact with the field, because sometimes a horse will just take himself out of the race. I think Johnny did a good job of at least keeping him in the race.
You're keeping him in the race, but unfortunately what happens too, if they stumble like that, sometimes horses will kind of catch their breath. They'll hold their breath for about 100 yards because they get startled. So he's not breathing properly. He's not in the same rhythm he would have been if he had broke smoothly. I mean, he wound up getting good position, and it looks like he has his chance, but it's really hard to determine exactly how much that took out of him.
Yeah, that's the way I felt. I felt like this horse ran enough to suggest that if he had broken cleanly and gotten good position, he wouldn't have had to put in that energy into getting himself into the race, and there's a good chance he could have won. He lost by just a little over 4 lengths, and I honestly believe that start easily could have accounted for 4 lengths.
Well, I agree 100%. And, you know, one of Johnny's strengths as a rider is he gets horses in a good rhythm, in a nice frame, and they kind of continue. You see a lot of horses that Johnny rides will make that continued forward progress from 3 furlongs out. This horse never, in my feeling, ever got into that rhythm because of the stumble.
Well, he's always playing catch-up, and that was the situation. We will now go to the first race from Saturday, November 21st. And speaking of stumbles, a young horse stumbles, and then he takes a nice hip check, and that's the 14 horse in here, Berea.
And, you know, this horse stumbled badly, and we see a lot of times out of the gate horses will make some contact. But when a horse is off balance like that, that's when they kind of get, they can't hold their ground because they're off balance and they get hit, and it's going to send them away from the contact. And you saw that pretty severely there.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's almost like he wasn't that bad here. It's after the contact and after it that you're going to see him drop severely out of the race. I thought Cornelio Velasquez did a very good job with this horse, settling him down. He actually gets to the inside, and we're going to show him a little bit, riding him to get in the race. And I thought, all things considered, he did a good job of getting him to get some momentum going forward.
Well, you know, now that I've been playing a little bit, I was thinking about the superfecta players and the effort that Cornelio Velasquez put in here, because it would have been very easy to put up the white flag and say, well, I got creamed at the start and I'm way back and I'm on a long shot and let me just get around here. Well, no, actually, he put in a big effort, and so did the horse.
No, I agree. And, you know, it's interesting you say that. You talk about supers and tries, and that is the importance of giving your horse the best chance it has. Now, especially early. We're not saying that guys who are 7th and fading in the stretch need to be trying to, you know, whip their horse to try to get him into a race they're obviously out of. Everybody has certain reasonable expectations. But this is a case where, with a disastrous start on a long shot, Cornelio gave him every chance to get a piece of the purse, and that's what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious as we come further, and you can see he's getting through inside. He did everything right. And sometimes that's the best thing you can do, Andy. You got off to that kind of, you know, troublesome start, stumbled, you know, bounced out of the race. You got to save every inch of ground because you've already been dealt a bad hand. So now everything's got to kind of go right for you to get a placing. Do you think this horse looks like she's closing well, or is it just that they went the last quarter in 27 and it's a bit of an optical illusion?
It's a bit of an optical illusion. She got a 34 buyer. So let's say she doesn't have the trouble at the start. Maybe she gets a buyer in the mid-40s. And I think that's a very important point you bring up. That's why we call it trips and traps. The question is, how much of this trip is a trip you want to bet back, or is it a trap? As Paul Kornman used to say, there are no trips in slow races. And it's a very true, it's a real truism because, in other words, the thinking is, so this horse, let's say it had 4 legs of trouble, it got a 44 buyer. Next time it runs, when the horses to beat are getting buyers in the low to mid-50s, why are we supposed to assume that this horse is going to beat those horses? And a lot of people immediately bet back horses with trouble. I think you have to evaluate. You have to say, well, how much did you think it cost the horse? And do you think the horse can move forward? What kind of field is in the next time? You have to use it as a handicapping tool, and you have to decide how much the trouble was worth.
Well, I think in this instance, my opinion, 2-year-old filly, inexperienced, I think she's got improvement in her anyway, and off a trip like that, I think you will see even more improvement.
I think that's a very, very fair point, but I also agree. I think you'll agree. You look at the next race. If she's in with horses that are 10 lengths faster than, she's not going to beat those horses. You have to be realistic about it. I think that's an important part of handicapping. Just because you see a bad trip doesn't mean your money has to go on it the next time it runs.
Well, and also, you want to get paid.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll see what happens with Berea. But that horse got a good ride and had some real trouble in there. We're going to take one more race, and that's the 7th race from Saturday the 21st. And we're going to talk about a horse, Blingo. And I had a couple of feelings, and you and Richie and I talked a little before we came on the air. He was unlucky, and Aaron Grider really tried to do the right things. One of the reasons he was unlucky, though, besides everything else, was this was a race that was wired by a 46-to-1 shot, where the pace pretty much held together in here. Well, Blingo's a dead closer. When 50-to-1 shots wire fields, it's not going to be easy for dead closers to be effective.
No, absolutely not. And I think Blingo probably hurt his own chances when he got out of the gate. You know, kind of okay. I won't say he broke slowly, but he didn't really break with it. And I know he's a closer, but it kind of takes you out of position immediately. Now, you're Aaron Grider. You're looking at the horses in front of you. Well, if I look up and I see Big Business, who I think's a live horse in this race.
That's this horse.
Yeah, the horse in the pink. I'm going to say, well, you know what? I'm going to get in behind him, follow his wake. He's going to be my fullback. I'm the halfback following him through the line. Well, the fullback got stymied because he just stopped. He had no run.
Yeah, I think that Big Business, the fact that he apparently is not nearly the horse he once was, I think that's what hurt Aaron the most because he had a choice to make here. Yeah, he could have gone around My Loot, the horse in pink, and gone 5 or 6 wide around the field and looked like a fool.
Yeah.
Or he could have tried to save more ground. As you say, he's trying to follow Big Business, but suddenly Big Business comes up empty, and he's unlucky. And I think you made a very good point, Richie, about the start. Because as a dead closer, it's subtle, but he's got to find position, make position. And here he's getting in trouble between horses, which I think further hurt him. If he breaks in rhythm, he finds his own position. But I think the sort of mediocre break doesn't help him.
No, because now it puts you even a little bit more behind the 8 ball. And just like you said, he's having to fight his way out here. It's not a smooth transition. The gray horse comes out into him a little bit there, Norumbega. And he was never in that, what we like to call, that good rhythm. It was interesting, and I thought it was a clear illustration of a rider knowing where they're at and being responsible for themselves, the other horses and riders. He could have tried to fit inside of Big Business. That would have been disastrous, particularly for the horse inside of him, Noble Cornerstone. Right. And a rider can't just say, and I know some people look at it and go, well, why didn't he just go inside of that horse? Because that horse is stopping, and he doesn't have enough horse or time to get all the way in there and still protect the guy inside of you. There is an onus on the rider that moves up in between horses to protect the guy inside of him.
Absolutely. He doesn't own that space. And you can't take a space away from somebody else. I think Blingo's a horse that was second off a long laugh. He had a couple of stake wins before it. My feeling about this race was if he were to run here again before going to California, and perhaps John Sheriff's going to ship him back to California, or even he's in California, I could give him a pass for this race. I think there's a real chance that he still can run a little bit, and he just didn't get a fair chance. The dynamics of the race weren't in his favor. He got stuck behind a dead horse. He got hampered as he tried to move outside. So to me, I can dismiss this out. In fact, I would almost say he didn't run that badly, and I could say I'll give him another chance if he's in the right spot.
And the other thing that we can't overlook, particularly this time of year, as we're getting ready to transition from the main track to the inner track, where we're going to have a lot more two-turn races, I think that he's more naturally a two-turn horse. I don't think the one-turn races really suit his style because, like we saw, sometimes they'll go a little quicker, but the pace will hold up more. Two-turn races seems to me where he has excelled, and I think that's something we got to start thinking about as we go to these, more two-turn races.
Well, now all we got to do is convince John Sheriffs to leave him here for the winner. If you're listening, John, we'd like to bet Bingo back on the inner track. That does it for this week's Trips and Traps. We can always use your help. It's Trips and Traps at NYRAinc.com.